Last week, a clip of the Dalai Lama went viral where he asked a small boy to suck his tongue while people were laughing in the background at this scene. It didn't even sound like nervous laughter. However, most people with a conscience looked at it and found it incredibly shocking. So after my video came out condemning the action, there was an angry mob of liberals and leftists and the typical wannabe conservative who always likes to score points with the left by being on the wrong side of every issue. And these guys appeared to be defending this act. Many of the rebuttals came in the claim that the act was purely cultural and that Christians are one to talk anyway. I mean, look at the Catholic Church. So in another episode of Missing the Point, we'll get to that at a different time in order to just try to sidestep what we're actually talking about. But in other words, these attacks ranged from cries for nuance all the way to the completely and irrational and irrelevant. So in short, the detractors just said, hey, we need to add a little bit of nuance to what the holy leader did and give him a little bit of grace. So the problem with that claim is that their replies displayed as much nuance as it did grace and humility. Well, and let's be honest, it lacked a bunch of accuracy as well. It's as though they should be working for Christianity today, in fact, that they lacked so much accuracy and desired so much to pander to the left. While I want to take a lighter tone today because I was actually mistaken about something in my original video, I do want to redouble down and get back to the main point. And the way I was wrong was in this way. The Dalai Lama asked the boy to suck his tongue, and he stuck it out and then pressed the boy's head against his. But I actually thought when I first saw the video, just because I was so shocked by it, that he actually allowed the boy to suck on his tongue, but he didn't. He pulled his tongue back before that happened, but the boy was going to do it because, of course, he's a small child. And obvious alert, children can't consent to almost anything because they're children, especially when adults are shoving things down their throat. One might think that's called grooming behavior. So I do want to take a lighter tone in that regard. I was wrong, and so it does change things slightly. But back to the main point. The guy still thought it would be a good joke, funny, to ask a little boy to suck his tongue. Now, the responses back sounded something like this. So it's just a cultural thing, right? So sticking out your tongue is something that's actually done by Tibetans, and it's a cultural way of kind of teasing and making a joke. Oh, you mean like it is in America? But how about sucking on someone's tongue? No, actually, commenters in the news media who had something to say about this. Folks in The Independent want to remind us that sticking out your tongue is traditionally a sign of respect or agreement and has also been used as a greeting in Tibetan culture, according to the Institute of East Asian Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Far be it from anybody at the University of California, Berkeley, to do anything radical and ridiculous. So notice here what they didn't say. They didn't say sucking someone's tongue, especially if you're a small boy, is a way of being playful and a way of greeting people. They just said sticking out your tongue. But the Dalai Lama said suck my tongue. So that isn't a greeting. So you mean that like sticking out your tongue is a playful way to greet somebody in the culture of Tibetan monks, just like in America? Which brings us to the next point. All of the talk here was around this idea that, oh, this is just a cultural misunderstanding, and you snowflake Republicans and conservatives and Christians, you're trying to interject your social mores upon the culture of East Asians, and that's why you think this act that was totally harmless is in some way sexual, because everything is sexual to you Puritans. Even to East Asian Tibetan monks, sucking on your tongue is something that's sexual in nature. This idea that we can say the word cultural and just dismiss something is really why I wanted to bring this up in this segment today, because we underestimate the power of culture. The reality is that culture is, yes, a subjective means of communication. It tries to communicate to people using the language of that people that they understand. So yes, by nature, culture is subjective. But you see, culture at its best, and what it's really intended to do is to subjectively communicate something that is objective. We hear this all the time with the wearing of dresses. When Phil Vischer just came out and tried to rebuke Dennis Prager for saying that men don't wear dresses, and Phil Vischer, the creator of VeggieTales, came out and said, "Oh, there's so many rules to try to obey in your religion," which some might suggest is anti-Semitic. But the idea there is that, hey, other cultures wear dresses, like African men in the bush. They wear what might be considered dresses. To those of you who are in the West, are they doing that which pertains to a woman? Are they being feminized by the culture, or is it just a different culture? Well, here's the reality. We don't live in Africa. And even in Tibet, tongue sucking is actually not something that's commonly done except in a sexual way. And when we talk about like wearing dresses in America and how in other cultures it's not such a big deal, why are we making it a big deal here? Because we understand the implicit message that's trying to be sent. Again, culture is a non-verbal sometimes, or even verbal ways of communicating with other people. And the thing that is trying to be communicated needs to be investigated. So when a man in America that doesn't live in Africa, since we're coming back to reality and actually talking about the subject here, when a man wears a dress, he's actually subtly trying to communicate something. And it may be something in the realm of, well, men and women aren't different. They're basically all the same. Or men can wear dresses because masculinity is just a social construct, and masculinity can be whatever you want it to be. So in other words, they're trying to implicitly communicate some kind of postmodern nonsense to each and every one of us. And for those of us who actually have an operating prefrontal cortex, we don't want to believe that nonsense. Not to mention, it isn't true, which is what the real point is at the end of the day. Culture subjectively communicates objective truths. And when it doesn't, we have to ask ourselves why. When a man reaches out his hand to shake another man's hand, he is trying to communicate respect. When a man asks a little boy to suck his tongue, you should ask yourself, what's he trying to communicate there? And I would think that question is absolutely in bounds. But beyond all of that, it shows us that cultural ideas and cultural norms are incredibly important because they can protect a little boy from being violated, and they can issue forth a normative action. Now, in society today, where the postmodern woke left wants to tell us that there is no such thing as normative, we're brought back to the understanding that that kind of nonsense destroys the nuclear family, destroys morality, and even destroys the physical body of minors. There are implications to culture, which is why culture matters, which is why we need those who understand their moral right and their moral obligation to stand up courageously in the culture war. It's an acknowledgement when we pay attention that culture matters and that culture is powerful. And more importantly, it may be an implicit acknowledgement that your courage is actually required at this time. Now, many of you watching this today will still try to excuse away your lack of commitment to engaging in the culture war, and you'll try to say something like, you culture war Christians, you obligate yourself to outrage about everything, and you can't be outraged about everything. Maybe this is a good analogy. You want to cancel Disney today and Bud Light tomorrow. Are you going to go around canceling everything? Well, the answer to that is probably no, but I don't think that's an honest question. The question is what are you going to stand for? And that really matters. And culture matters. I hope you understand that cultural norms exist and they create. See, that's the important thing to understand about culture, that culture has the power to create. It has the power to create a consciousness in the mind of people where tongue sucking by children can actually be permissible, or it can say, no, it's not permissible, and lead people to a different conclusion. All of that in a nutshell is to illustrate the power of culture and why it matters for Christians to engage in the culture war. So your voice matters, and infinitely more as the culture swings radically to the left. And it makes me wonder, how much further left will it have to swing before you recognize that the world that's being created is not the one that you want your kids to grow up in, and perhaps maybe not even the one that you want to grow up in. So if you recognize that the world that's been created is not one that you not only don't recognize, but is also one that you don't want to live in, then I suggest you do something about it. And I'd love to hear what you're going to do about it down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and most importantly, go with God. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely want to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.